Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron, and today we are going to be going over 5 very strong scout builds. So let's hop right into this. Our very first one is going with Hipster with the M1000 and going with embedded detonators with the Zukov submachine guns. So the strength of this build is that it kills basically everything really fast. Hipster on the M1000 is arguably one of the strongest overclocks in the entire game. It's also one of the most flexible overclocks in the entire game for some reason. This is my Hipster build right over here. This is the spam fire Hipster build. This is just to fire as many shots as you can at whatever the heck you want to. It doesn't really matter if you're hitting headshots, body shots, whatever. Just spray it at everything and everything's going to die very fast. If you don't like this build though, there are plenty of other builds you could go with. You could go with damage build by simply swapping out the ammo in tier 1 for damage in tier 2. Tier 5 is completely optional. And if you really like focus shots, then you can go with the damage in tier 1 and tier 3 with the M1000. This only lets you have 4 focus shots, but your focus shots will one-shot, body shot, smaller grunts. You could also go with this build too, which is far easier to control Hipster, but it definitely doesn't benefit as much from just going for body shots. This is still a damaging Hipster build, but you're going to be wanting to go for headshots with this one. Like I said, very flexible overclock right here, and you get a lot of mileage out of Hipster. I think that this one is fantastic, and I love all the ways that you can build it. With the Zukovs, they are far more straightforward, at least if you're running embedded detonators, because embedded detonators lowers your damage and lowers your ammo. It also lowers your magazine size, but your damage doesn't really matter because the explosive from the detonators is what's going to get you a lot of damage. So the way that I build embedded detonators is this right here. This is going with extra ammo, faster reloads, better accuracy, more ammo, and then electric rounds, because I usually run this with the IFG. If you're not running the IFG, then take get in, get out in tier 5, or if you just don't plan on using the IFG all that much in combination with the Zukovs, because they're not entirely necessary to get that extra damage on top of them, but it is kind of fun to have it. So whatever you like really there. Could also potentially go with blow-through rounds in tier 4 because embedded detonators can trigger twice if you hit multiple enemies. It's still usually not as valuable as just having more ammo in general, and then the rest is pretty self-explanatory. You don't need damage in tier 1 and 3, so there's no point in going with it. The other options are better. Tier 2, again, it's your choice, but I like the faster reloads just so that I can use the embedded detonators even more often. This build doesn't really struggle at anything. It's really good at clearing up crowds. It's really good at clearing up big enemies. It's very strong against dreadnoughts. Do be aware though that embedded detonators works differently on the dreadnoughts, where it will only go off so long as there is an exposed part of the dreadnought. So if you're hitting the dreadnought's armor, the detonators will not go off. So this counts for the first stage of the regular dreadnought, and it counts for the kind of first stage, I guess whatever you want to call it, of the twins whenever they have armor on. If you're hitting a non-armored spot or a spot that you strip the armor away from, then the detonators will still go off. For our second strong build, we have another M1000 classic. This is going with minimal clips, and this is the exact same setup as my Spamfire M1000 Hipster build, but this one you usually use focus shots on, or at least I do. You can switch some of these around. You can actually switch the majority of them around however you'd like. I would recommend the armor breaking and the larger magazine size. You don't really need the extra damage in tier 3. And the larger magazine size does help because this makes it so you can go up to 18 rounds in the gun. So if you are using focus shots, then you get 9 focus shots in total. And with the armor breaking in tier 2, you can just one-shot body shot, at least with the focus shots. Grunts on any difficulty, even if you're on hazard 4 or 5, doesn't matter. They will still penetrate them. It's also really useful to have the blow-through rounds in tier 4 just so that you can punch through multiple, but it's not entirely necessary. You could go with the damage in tier 4 as well. That gets you just even more weak spot damage. So if you are hitting those weak spots, you're just getting more value out of it. This one is a pretty basic build. If you like the M1000, I think you're really going to enjoy this one because it's nothing but a bonus. It's also really nice to have the killing machine in tier 5. Again, it's not necessary though. You can pick whatever you want here. This just gives you faster reloads, and this overclock also increases your reload speed, which is pretty nice. For a secondary, we're going to be pairing this with the Special Powder Boomstick. What Special Powder does is let you fly with the boomstick. As long as your feet are off the ground and you fire the boomstick, you will be flying in the opposite direction that you shot. Now, this can be a little bit of an issue, because if you fall off of a cliff and then fire it up at some sort of enemy, it will fling you further down and you'll be going much faster. And fall damage is not calculated by how far you fall, but how fast you fall. So you can potentially kill yourself with this one, but you can also save yourself by flying away with it, breaking your fall with it. It's also just a very fun overclock to have in general. It's probably one of the most fun overclocks in the entire game. The build is pretty straightforward for it. Going with ammo in tier 1 and 3, this is just so that you can use it more often, but you could switch out either one of those if you want damage. There is the options of more pellets or of just higher damage in tier 1. In tier 2, the faster rate of fire is potentially better, although the extra reload speed is also nice. So with the faster rate of fire, you can fling yourself up further, as well as your reload speed is actually increased because reload speed is affected by the rate of fire of the gun, so how fast you can shoot it does help with its reload. It's a little bit weird that it works that way. So this does technically reload a little bit quicker, or at least you'll be able to reload a little bit quicker with more distance than just taking the faster reload speed. Faster reloads do work pretty well though, and it's great if you are like me and forget to reload your gun and switch out pretty constantly. You might want to take that one. I still do it just for that reason, or if you're just firing one shot at a time and you find that you aren't needing to fire out both barrels really quick. Blow through rounds in tier 4 is just so much value, although armor breaking is also a decent option here, whatever you want. And then in tier 5 going with white phosphorus rounds just so we can get fire on there, although I do also like Fear the Boomstick because fearing enemies is pretty nice too. Pretty straightforward build here. It's 2 clean overclocks that are very solid, but can be a lot of fun and can work in pretty much every situation. There's not really any mission type that this one's going to struggle against, and you should have a decent amount of ammo the majority of the time. Moving on to our third strong loadout, we have the Drac Plasma Carbine combined with the Boomstick. So with the Drac, we are running Impact Deflection. This is now a balanced overclock. It used to be a clean overclock. It used to be a whole lot better. It's still really good, but it used to have no downside on it. What Impact Deflection does is let you have bouncy rounds. All of your shots can bounce once. This is pretty useful. It makes it so every shot can potentially hit twice because you could hit the enemy one time, have it bounce into either the same enemy or a different enemy with that second bounce. The bounces are a little bit random, but that doesn't really matter because we're going to be pairing this with Plasma Splash, and this is the build that I'm running with the Drac. With this one, we have faster cooling in tier 1 and tier 3, more ammo in tier 2, Plasma Splash in tier 4, and then faster rate of fire in tier 5. This one's pretty flexible though. You can build it however you'd like, although I would highly recommend you take the Plasma Splash in tier 4. That just helps out a lot. It makes it so that you can clear up crowds even better, and this way, even if you just hit near an enemy, it's going to splash and hit them, and it can hit multiple enemies. It's going to bounce, and then it can hit and splash again, dealing more damage. So you get a lot of damage over time. You could take the faster rate of fire in tier 1 if you really dislike the lower rate of fire that the Impact Deflection gives you. That is an option too, but I don't mind it as much, and I usually just go with the better cooling so I can use the Drac even more often. Pretty straightforward build here. It's really going to help you against swarmers, and it will help a lot against grunts. It can be a little bit finicky against longer ranged enemies and against Mactera in particular, but even then it's not bad. And then like I said, we're pairing it with the Boomstick, and we are taking Jumbo Shells. What Jumbo Shells does is give you a ton of extra damage in the form of extra damage per pellet, but you lose out on overall ammo and you lose out on reload speed. That can be kind of rough, and the build that I'm running with this is this one right here. Extra ammo, faster rate of fire, even more pellets so we get even more damage. You could go with ammo here though, it's your choice. I just like having the big overkill damage. Blow through rounds in tier 4 and then white phosphorus rounds in tier 5. This lets you have a ton of damage at very close range, or even up to longer range, because the Boomstick can sometimes have pretty good spread even at medium to long range. This pairs very nicely with the Drac, where the Drac is very good at clearing up all the small enemies. This one is good at clearing up all the big enemies. Again, you might have some trouble with really far-ranged enemies or flying enemies, assuming you don't hit them with the Jumbo Shells, because if you do, they're not going to be much of a problem to you at all. And that's why we have these two paired together, because they complement each other so well. For our fourth strong scout build, we've got this one. This is the Overtune Particle Accelerator for the Drac Plasma Carbine. This one gives you a lot more direct damage, but lowers your overall ammo, increases your heat per shot, and increases your spread by a lot. That extra damage, though, is very important, and it makes it so this build is actually quite flexible. I would recommend taking the cooling in tier 1 and tier 3, because otherwise you will overheat this really quick. I usually don't take the manual heat dump, but you could if you want in tier 5. In tier 4, honestly, all of these are great options. The electricity will get you more damage over time. Splash makes it very consistent for killing crowds, and then armor breaking makes it the best for killing big targets. Really, whichever one of these you want, though. Sometimes I'll take armor breaking, sometimes I'll take plasma splash, and I usually take the extra ammo in tier 2, just because we lose out on ammo and we get back up to about what we had to begin with. You're going to be using this at close to medium range. It does not do well at all at long range, but that's okay because we have a secondary also paired with this. We're going to be pairing it with the crossbow, and for the crossbow, we have quick fire. I have it set up like this, but realistically, you could pick whatever you want in tier 1 and tier 5. Those are your choices. You can really pick whatever you want in any of these. The only one I wouldn't really recommend you take is the extra movement speed or the extra velocity in tier 3, because there's no real need. I've never found it necessary for me to be shooting at really, really long ranges and have the crossbow bolt get there pretty much immediately. If you have those experiences though, I think it would be an okay option, but I think the reload speed helps out a little bit more as well as the quick swap speed. Everything else though, pick whatever you'd like. You're going to be using this for long range and for big targets at long range. It's great for picking off any sort of flying enemies, and it's great for picking off web and acid spitters. Menaces too, it deals pretty high damage as well as the crossbow has a very high stun chance. So even if you don't kill something, there's a high chance you can stun it, then get close and use the Drac to finish it off. I really like this build since it came into Season 2, where we didn't really have a long-range option before this. The only real sort of long-range option you had to pair with the Overtuned Particle Accelerator was going with Shaped Shells with the Boomstick, which is still a really good build and a really fun overclock to use. But I think that this one fits this playstyle a little bit more to where we are covering everything at pretty much every range. And then our fifth and final build for today for the Scout is going with Bullets of Mercy GK2. This is a balanced overclock that overall lowers your magazine size, but it gives you 33% more damage if enemies are affected by any sort of status effect. This only triggers for one status effect though, so even if something has multiple status effects, it doesn't matter, you're still only getting that 33% more damage. Now, the way that I build it is like this, with extra rate of fire, extra ammo, extra mag size, more weak spot damage, and the ability to stun, because stuns count towards Bolts of Mercy as well. Stuns, frozen, fire, corrosive, neurotoxin, and electricity, I believe, are all the ones that count towards the status effect. Things like pheromones do not count towards it, so pairing this with the crossbow to have pheromones doesn't really work, but pairing it with the electricity bolts does work. Now, you could also build this all for damage and then just use it against status affected enemies. That does let you hit certain breakpoints on certain enemies, but I don't find it very necessary because you will likely have dealt damage to the enemy before that, just in the form of whatever status effect you were trying to put on them, or a teammate would have something like a flamethrower, because almost every team is going to be running some sort of status effect, whether that be fire, electricity, ice, whatever it might be, especially if you just have a driller on your team, then it's pretty much guaranteed. And to complement this, we're going to be taking Cryo Minelets with the Zukovs as our secondary. The Cryo Minelets allow us to freeze enemies, which is going to be very useful for our Bullets of Mercy. It's also very useful if you just want to hit things with your pickaxe, because all frozen enemies take extra melee damage as well as extra damage from everything. This clears up crowds pretty well. I have it built like this. Extra ammo because we don't really need damage. Damage doesn't really matter since we're just trying to get the status effect out of this, and we have enough damage anyway for just clearing up smaller things. Faster reloads, although you can take whatever you want in tier 2, doesn't really matter. Increased accuracy in tier 3, again this one doesn't really matter though either. Blow through rounds in tier 4 because this allows you to hit an enemy, punch through, and then leave the Cryo Minelet behind them. This also works really well with Electro Minelets with Gunner, which we're going to talk about in a later video. And then you can pick whatever you want in tier 5. Pretty much the way that you're going to be using this is trying to shoot through enemies with the Zukovs, but trying to hit the ground next to the enemy so that you can potentially freeze it or freeze enemies behind it. Then switch to Bullets of Mercy with your GK2 and just spray them down. I find that this strategy works pretty well against most enemies. It can take a little bit of time, but it can be very ammo efficient and pay off quite well, especially against large enemies like Praetorians and Dreadnoughts. These were 5 really strong Scout builds. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope they help you out. And tell me what your favorite builds are for Scout down in the comments below. I will be doing guides for all the classes, as well as fun builds for all the classes too. So if you're not subscribed, be sure that you get subscribed. That way you get to see all of these. Special thanks to the supporters of this channel. These are members over here on YouTube, patrons over on Patreon. They get early access to videos like this. And if you guys would like to see any of my other Deep Rock builds, be sure to check out this playlist right over here. Thanks for that. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye!